I'm Susanna Bowling, and this is live from the Hotel Edison, Times Square Chronicles presents. We are continuing with Women's Month, and I am so excited to have the guest I have because I've known her for 14 years.
Yeah.
And she is now an international journalist. She's on the Golden Globe Foundation, and she has been named one of the 25 most influential women by Worth. We're talking Miriam Spritzer. Miriam, when I first met you, you were a ballet dancer, you were trying for musical theater, and then all of a sudden your career path changed. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think by the time I moved to the US, and that was around the time that we met, I was already a retired ballerina at that point. And in my teenage years when you're choosing where you're going to go for university, even though I considered going for musical theater, I ended up going for business school because it was something that would allow me to, let's say, worst case scenario, get a job, and I could pursue the musical theater things on the side. So I moved to New York kind of to do a graduate program that was unrelated to musical theater, but I chose New York so I could be close to that world of musical theater, and I think that's kind of where we met because about a year into my life in New York, once I moved here, I got invited to be an international correspondent for this Brazilian TV channel. And I was like, well, I can try it. I don't know anything about journalism, but I know a lot of people in the entertainment world. I know the cultural world, and it could be fun. And if I'm not good at it, they won't keep hiring me. So worst case scenario, I'll do it once and never again. And things kind of took a life of its own. I never thought that I would be working in communication for the arts. I actually thought I would be performing, but all this no's that I had when I would audition and all this frustration that I had as a performer, that it's a very difficult path. I wasn't really getting when I was becoming a reporter for that because people were excited to talk to me about their projects. I could talk to a lot of people that in an audition process I wouldn't be able to talk. I could talk to composers, directors, performers, and so on, and ask all those questions that I had as a performer, as someone that was passionate about theater and the arts. And I figured out, I actually love this because I'm still, somehow still performing because I am communicating, but now I have a different way of performance, which is talking about the art itself and helping them promote, because that was a huge frustration for me, is that my friends, my family didn't love the theater or ballet or classical music as I had, and I was like always trying to explain to them. So this was like a kind of way to explain, if you're interviewing a composer, well, they'll have to listen to it.
Now, when I first met you, you spoke English, but you definitely had an accent and definitely...
I think I still do have the same accent though, because I lived here before. I lived here.
No, you have an accent, but it's gotten so much.
I don't know. I think if anything, it's even more, because I think like when I moved, so I lived in California in high school as an exchange student. Then I lived 2 years in Pennsylvania on and off for different work projects in business, not in the entertainment world. And I think at that time my accent became a little bit more American. In New York, everybody had an accent.
That's true.
So I realized that it was part of my identity to have an accent, and I didn't really mind anymore having to tone it down, and I think it's probably stronger than when we met. I'm not sure.
Now let's get to the first part. You're from Brazil.
I'm from Brazil, yes,
and
born and raised.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't Magda help you get your green card?
Well, no, really. Magda was someone who introduced me to a lot of people. I got my green card because of my work. Basically, Pat Addis did write me a recommendation letter. Magda did help me before with other letters of recommendation, even on my apartment. Magda was one of the people that testified for my character, that I would pay my bills in order. And but she did help me with, I always joke with Magda, Magda is someone I absolutely love, that there is life before and there is life after meeting Magda. And it's true.
No, that's true.
That is absolutely true. And it's very funny because I don't know if she knows this, but I probably would not be covering film and TV nowadays if it wasn't for her, because many years ago, and this was around the time when I changed visas, And she actually said, well, you should look into covering Tribeca Film Festival because you might get a lot of big names. Up to that point, I was always just trying and focusing on covering Broadway.
Oh, really?
And that was when I started covering Tribeca Film Festival, and then that opened a door that I did not go to school for journalism at the time. Like I was going, again, I did go back to
Well,
school.
you've now done it. I
I've
never
done
did.
it, yeah. Well, I did because in Brazil you have to have a diploma in journalism, and I figured that I wanted to have the academic basis. So, I teach classes at different universities and different courses, and also I wanted to be able to have the same language as them. Like if I'm talking to someone who is my editor-in-chief, I want to know what language, not language as English, Portuguese,
Right, but the language of
journalism. Yes, like what do they mean by that, and not having to be like, gosh, what is this? But by the time I was doing the schooling, I was already working for a long time. So, it was interesting to get that point of view between what the academic world was and what reality was. Like academic world would say, you're going to write an interview, like a profile on this person. You're going to have 10 days. And I was like, no, you have 10 minutes. If so.
Exactly.
And in those 10 minutes, you have to get the best quality of content because you have to turn that into a 6-page thing.
And content that other people haven't thought of. So
Yes.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so you have to do your research, you kind of have to be smart in the way you ask questions. But going back to Magda and the Tribeca Film Festival was basically, once I started covering that and I was able to connect with the studios, I realized that, whether I like it or not, TV and film were much more open and prepared for international media than the theater world was. Well, it's kind of the same. I don't get paid by the studios, I get paid by the outlets, so I'm still in the same situation. But there was, and there still is, a barrier of entry if you're in international media covering the theater.
Oh, true.
Like, I have had so many times that I had to meet the producer, and the producer will then put me in touch with the press person in order to allow me to cover the show. Meanwhile, film, it's much more open. And I understand that because it's easier to sell internationally, but I will say this, in my defense, Phantom of the Opera wasn't open on Broadway for over 30 years for nothing. It was a big touristic attraction.
Oh, absolutely.
And the same goes for Disney shows.
And the reason why is you don't have to speak the language to understand the show.
Not just that, I think, people that travel, a lot of them do speak the language.
Oh,
it's
sure.
just that it's very focused in New York because it's the biggest market, but there is a lot of, New York is a touristic city, so for me, it's smart to invest in that audience. Like, look at me, I grew up in the south of Brazil, out of all places, and I was a child who spoke English and had a love for musical theater. So that's what brought me to New York, and that's also why many years before that, I would come to New York and I would see, 10 shows in a week.
What's so crazy about this is because I own the paper and do the podcast, you'd be surprised. We're read a great deal in India,
Yeah.
a great deal in China, in Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're read internationally, and that stuns me.
Well, but people come to New York and they want to know what are they going to do.
Right.
And one of the things is they're going to go to Times Square Chronicles to see what is up in New York, like what's the new thing. Us New Yorkers, we're here, we already know. And most of the times we don't
That's true.
We don't want to wait in line, we don't want to go anywhere that's too agitated and too many people and the crowds are there. But if you're a tourist, they want to know, oh, Little Island is new, I've never been there. Or, there's this new Broadway show. And that's something that it's more of the person that is not here than the person who is here.
True. Of all the people that you've interviewed, which one has been the most thrilling for you?
That's a tough question. It always depends. I interviewed a lot of my idols. I interviewed a lot of people I was intimidated by. But it always depends, right? Like I had situations, for example, with Enrique Iglesias. What wasn't necessarily, like, yes, his music was a very big part of my life without me noticing because he was massive in Brazil. But the fact was that I did a few interviews with him in the same day because I was doing the coverage for Europe before his tour. So I was hired by his team to do all the press in the name of other outlets. So that was fun because while we're doing interviews in between, while you're waiting for the cameras to change and everything else, we're socializing, and that creates a different type of connection with the interviewee. And by the end of the day, we're making jokes at each other, like, if you're presenting yourself 10 times, hi, I'm Miriam Spritzer, like, then he's making fun of me. And like, it was just a fun activity to do.
That's like me at Tony time, because I'm seeing these people every single day. So at this point, I just do one question per day.
And that's the kind of like the same thing that we have in award season. We also end up sometimes interviewing the people same like over and over and over. Like, okay, like I asked you about this before, but let me ask you about this again. Like that happened with Sean Baker, that I was so fortunate to have the chance to kind of follow Honora's trajectory from May in Cannes until quite recently when he won the Oscars. And I was like, look, I pretty much asked him most of the things that I wanted to ask because there were different interview opportunities. And this is great because you also see the film in different moments and you're like, well, now I noticed this because he mentioned about that. And, but like, look, I'm a theater geek, I'm through and through. So of course, talking to Stephen Schwartz recently about Wicked, going on film, that's amazing. And like hearing from him like, oh, those are such good questions. Like, yes, because I've been studying this for 25 years.
I'm seeing him Monday for Broadway HD's
Oh, amazing.
So I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like we interviewed so many people.
But I've known him so long.
Yes, and he's been around. I've got the opportunity to meet him many times, and it's like wonderful, But same thing, like I did the cover for Marie Claire with Isabella Rossellini, and that was like another, I've interviewed her many times since, but that first time I had 2 hours with her and then a photo shoot.
Oh, nice.
So that's a full day of opportunity that you have to connect with that person and maybe get more of the intel. And I think for them it's also nicer because they know I'm not there to threaten them, I'm there to help them tell their stories. So, and I think, again, like, I was not a massive fan, but I fell in love with Ariana Grande by interviewing her on Weekend. Because, again, both she and I love musical theater, and by my first question, she got it, and we're like, okay, we can be geeks here. So, those are the fun things.
Who's the most famous person that you've interviewed?
Oprah.
Oprah.
I think that's like, it's a no-brainer. I don't think there's anyone more famous in the world than Oprah. Maybe the Pope.
Who haven't you interviewed that you'd like to interview?
Many people. I have a huge list. I would love to interview. I have my list, and like I think once I get the list, I will retire. Paul McCartney is one of my first top. Julie Andrews. I don't think I would have the emotional capability of interviewing her because I think I would be so starstruck. Cher, I'd love to interview Cher. I'm absolutely crazy about Cher, and Barbra Streisand. And Bette Midler.
I can see why these would be on your list.
Yeah.
You were just given one of the 25 most influential women by Worth. What does that mean to you, and what is that to you?
It's mind-blowing. When I saw the list, so basically I was informed that I'm part of the Golden Globes Foundation. I'm on the board of directors, and
how did that happen?
So I joined the former HFPA, that now became the Golden Globes, in 2021, I think, or 2021. I think it was 2021. And I'm not sure now if it's 2021 or 2022. I'll have to check. I think 2021. But I joined them, and it was part of the selection process once they opened for members outside of LA, because keep in mind, pre-pandemic, you had to be in person at the event, so everything was in person. And it was not viable to have someone outside of LA because you wouldn't be able to attend the meetings, you wouldn't be able to attend the press conferences and whatnot.
And what?
So, but they had so many events, you had to be there in the full week, So what happened was that when the pandemic came and everything kind of became virtual, or at least hybrid, they were able to have people that weren't necessarily in LA, and I participated on the selection process. I sent in my best work. I did not think I would get selected, and then, thankfully I was. Surprise! And I was there with people that I've read my whole life, and, like the journalist who wrote the book in Brazil on how to write about film and TV was a member, and we became friends, and she's such a great person. And I was there with people that I admire the work for the longest time. So it was mind-blowing, that to begin with. And I got to know a lot more about the awards, and I got to see a different side of Hollywood that I didn't have access or any understanding before. So now I know that when a film doesn't win the Oscars or it doesn't get nominated, it wasn't snubbed. You know, it just
wasn't snubbed?
It wasn't snubbed. There are a lot of votes. It's just that sometimes it has one vote less than the one that got it. So it's not easy to get, like, that's today I know that it is an honor to be nominated, because it's so hard. If people could understand how difficult it is to go from those 500 names or even more to a list of 5, and you can only choose 5. And you know, like we that work in the arts, we know how people work hard for it, and sometimes it's their dream and they give a performance of a lifetime, but there is other 6 that you also love who also gave a performance of a lifetime and whatnot. So it is very difficult to get to the list of 5. So when you do get that majority of the 5 people that end up being nominated, it's an honor. Like, you're already a winner just to be nominated. So if by any chance, if you're watching this and you don't get an Oscar or Golden Globes, don't think you were snubbed. You won just by being there.
Well, I have to tell you, this year actually surprised me, because even though I think Zoe Saldana's performance is absolutely amazing, it's not a supporting actor role. She's in the entire frickin' film.
Yes, and although personally I agree with that, that depends on the studio. It is the studio that decides where they're going to position each. Same, again, like
No,
this
was
was
going to happen probably this year with Floyd Collins.
But that's the same of, like, if you look at Wicked, right? When you look at the history of Wicked on Broadway, Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth were nominated for Best Actors.
Yes.
And the show was very focused on the friendship of the 2 women.
Absolutely.
Right? And then the movie, they decided to put Elphaba as a lead and Glinda as a supporting.
Right.
Now, is that going to repeat next year with the new film? I don't know. Because
It depends on the script, or depends on what they're trying to get accomplished.
We have no idea. And the thing is, arguably, and these are conversations that we have when we're going through the eligibility.
Right.
And we sometimes go back to the studio and we'll be like, you know what, we don't agree with that. We think, and there is a little bit back and forth, but ultimately it is the decision of the studio. And they have the strategies or even a choice, or you know what, they actually think for that storytelling that this should be considered a supporting role and this should be considered a leading role. And I'm not the producer of the film. It was not my, you know.
I'm not blaming you for this. It just
no. But I mean, if you read Twitter, it's like, yeah, they don't. It's not us. It doesn't depend on us. Like, I remember people complain a lot about May December, as it was put in the comedy category.
Right.
And while personally I agree that it's drama, there are a lot of people that thought it was like a comedy, a campy film, that it was supposed to be funny, but it was like a dark comedy, and I get it. Now, substance, a lot of people were complaining that it should not be comedy. I disagree. I laughed throughout Substance, the whole film. It's a satire of terror films. So again, art is subjective.
Yeah, right.
And I think that people forget that. People are expecting that art is so like literal right now. And it's like, no, sometimes it's going to depend on the eye, on who is watching it.
I have 2 questions before we end. What haven't I asked you that you would like our audience to know about you?
I don't know if I answer any of the questions you asked me, because I don't think I answered the Worth magazine thing. I'm waiting to the Golden Globes thing.
Okay, so do you want to say anything about that?
No, yeah, look, it's mind-blowing, really. I did not, first of all, I didn't know what it was when they submitted me for, and then when I went to see it, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then when I got selected, I had no idea who was also going to be on the list. And being on the list with people like Barry Weiss, who's an outstanding journalist, and then you have Serena Williams, who is the GOAT,
And you're like,
you know, and Brooke Shields, and all these people that we admire, we follow, and whatnot. So it's great, but I also am very happy to be representing the Golden Globes Foundation, because I think that the charity work that the Golden Globes does, it's not always seen, and the Golden Globes has always been one of the biggest donors in the arts.
And my last question to you is, what advice would you give women who want to follow in your footsteps?
Have no shame. Don't be embarrassed to get the nose. I look, and Magda knows this a lot. I started, the reason why I got to New York where I was, and I was able to start my career in journalism was because when I would come here as a teenager, as a tourist, I would knock on the doors of theaters and be like, hi, I'm a Brazilian actress and I want to see how the backstage works. So even before I auditioned for a musical, like an actual professional musical in Brazil and here, I had been on the backstage of theaters. I knew people.
That was so smart. I read about that, and so smart.
But that was my real. I was so passionate about the theater world that the way that I had to learn about it was reading playbills, watching everything that was available, and this is before like the internet as we know today. So there wasn't a lot around, and honestly, I was very fortunate that I was met with very kind people that opened these doors and showed me around, whether they were, people, dressers, whether they were doormen from theaters, or even actors who were starting their careers, and they also saw like, one day I was this kid who wanted to be a performer, and a lot of them became friends. So that's the cool thing, that to this day, I have these people that I've met in the most random ways, and that's also valid for cinema. I've met a lot of people that when they were starting their careers and now they are bigger names, and like we've known each other since back then, whether or not they're publicists or the security guard from the red carpet or even performers. So that's the cool thing, and I think it's like I said that at the Worth magazine interview because a mentor of mine said this when I was learning how to be a journalist. Your goal is your network. The goal that you have are the people, like the fact that you can easily text me and be like, are you free? And I don't even know what it is, and I say yes because we get along and we've had this relationship for 14, 15 years. In the same way that I was like, look, I have this story, are you interested? We've done this so many times, and I think that that's priceless.
Thank you. I am so grateful to my guest, Miriam Spritzer. When you are looking on the red carpets, look for the most glamorous one there, because I'm telling you, it'll be Miriam. I'd like to thank Magda Katz for filming us and making us look and sound good, and for introducing me to Miriam. I'd like to thank Ramel Gopez and the Hotel Edison for giving us a home and a place to share our podcast with you. I'm Susanna Bowling, and this is live from the Hotel Edison. Times Square Chronicles presents.